Hello, and welcome to the observation deck. I'm so glad you've decided to step up here with me today. Take a moment to just settle in. Notice the air, notice the stillness, and let's look out at the world together. I want you to start by observing a very specific, very heavy sensation that has become almost universal in our modern lives. Imagine it is a Tuesday night, maybe a little past midnight. You are exhausted, but your mind is still racing in fifth gear. You are lying in the dark, and the only light in the room is the cold, blue glare of your smartphone. As you scroll, you are hit with a relentless tide of other people's victories. You see a former classmate who just landed a senior role at a global firm. You see an old friend posting a sunset photo from a balcony in a city you've always wanted to visit. You see people your age signing the deeds to their first homes or announcing perfect engagements. And in that moment, a hollow, nagging weight settles in your chest. It is that cold whisper that says, you are falling behind. You are losing a race you never even agreed to run. It feels as if everyone else was handed a secret manual for adulthood at graduation, and you are the only one left standing in the middle of a crowded room, holding a blank piece of paper. We call this social anxiety or a lack of ambition, but from the observation deck, we see it for what it truly is, a biological and psychological tax on your soul. We are the first generation in history forced to compare our behind-the-scenes struggles with everyone else's greatest hits reel. 24 hours a day. I remember a few years ago, I attended a reunion with some friends from my university days. The air was thick with what I call status updates. Everyone was eager to share their newest title, their salary bump, or their latest exotic acquisition. When the conversation finally turned to me, I felt a visceral urge to simply disappear. You see, on paper, my year looked completely empty. I hadn't been promoted. I hadn't moved to a trendy new zip code. But what I couldn't explain to them in a 30-second soundbite was that I had spent the last 12 months doing the most difficult, invisible work of my life. I was untangling emotional knots I'd carried since I was a child. I was ending friendships that were prestigious, but deeply toxic. I was sitting in silence, trying to figure out what I actually valued when the noise of other people's expectations was finally turned off. I drove home that night feeling like a ghost. I had a mental scorecard in my head, and I was beating myself up for every unchecked box. I felt like a low-resolution version of a successful human being. It took me a long time to realize that I wasn't falling behind. I was simply refusing to follow a cultural script that was never written for my long-term well-being. I was building the foundation while everyone else was busy painting the shutters of a house that had no floor. The reason this decade feels so terrifying is actually found in the very biology of your brain. In the world of cognitive science, we know that your 20s are not just an extended adolescence. They are actually the final, most consequential period of neural reorganization. Your prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, the part responsible for long-term planning, emotional regulation, and self-identity is undergoing its final major renovation. This creates a biological paradox. We are expected to make the most monumental choices of our lives or careers, our partners, our financial habits at the exact moment when our brain's decision-making center is still technically under construction. Because we feel so much internal uncertainty, we desperately grab onto external markers of success to feel safe. We think that if we get the right job title or the right relationship status, the internal chaos will stop, but we have confused the markers of success with the makers of success. We chase the symbols while neglecting the internal capacities that actually produce those outcomes over time. Every year you spend optimizing for how your life looks to others is a year you aren't investing in your identity capital. These are the invisible assets within yourself, your skills, your self-awareness, and your psychological flexibility that actually determine whether you will thrive or merely survive in the decades to come. How do we move from performing our lives to actually building them? At the observation deck, we look at a framework I call the I.C.E method: identity, capacity, and energy. First, let's look at identity formation. This is the unsexy process of excavating who you are from under the mountain of who you were told to be. Think of one of your current goals. Maybe it is to reach a certain salary or a specific job title by the time you are 30. Now, ask yourself, why 5 times? By the 5th why, you usually find a root that has nothing to do with you. Often, It is about wanting to feel superior to a sibling or wanting to prove something to a person who doubted you years ago. When you realize a goal is just a prop for your ego, you get the freedom to drop it and find something that actually aligns with your authentic self. This is how you stop building a life for an audience and start building it for a resident. Next is capacity building. This isn't about working harder or grinding. It is about deepening your ability to handle complexity and discomfort. In an age where everyone's attention is fragmented into 15-second intervals, the ability to focus deeply on a single, difficult task for 2 hours is a legitimate superpower. Most people's discomfort tolerance is atrophying. They check their phone the second they feel a hint of boredom or frustration, but your capacity only grows in the friction. Whether it is having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding or learning a skill that makes your brain ache, you are training your system to stay in the room when things get hard. This is the unsexy work that creates asymmetric advantages 10 years down the road. Finally, we have energy management. This is perhaps the most neglected pillar of all. We treat our energy like a credit card with no limit, but the interest rates on burnout are devastating. Energy protection is about attention hygiene. It is about ruthlessly unsubscribing from the noise, the people who drain you, the apps that make you feel small, the news that triggers a constant state of alarm. Recovery is not a luxury. It is basic maintenance. You don't wait until you are dehydrated to drink water, and you shouldn't wait until you are burnt out to rest. The most radical move you can make in your 20s is to stop playing the short-term game. In our culture of instant gratification, the ability to think in 10-year horizons is incredibly rare and valuable. I once knew a person who turned down a high-paying, prestigious job at 24 to take a low-paying role at a small startup where they could learn 10 different skills in a year. Their friends thought they were crazy. They looked behind for a long time, but by the time they reached 30, they had a capacity and a sense of identity that made them 10 times more valuable and 100 times more autonomous than their peers who had stayed in comfortable, rigid roles. We have to realize that our 20s are a period of exploration, not a final declaration. You don't have to know exactly who you are forever, right now. You just have to be willing to build your capital. When you prioritize relationship depth over the sheer breadth of your network, and when you fall in love with the boring daily process rather than the shiny outcome, you are playing a game that actually leads to peace. As we stand here on the observation deck, looking out at the noise of the world below, I want you to remember this. The race you think you're losing is an illusion. There is no finish line in your 20s. There is only the quiet, invisible work of becoming a person who can carry the weight of a legendary life later on. Don't be afraid to be unimpressive for a while. Don't be afraid to be the one who is working on their foundation while everyone else is busy decorating their facade. The most powerful shifts in our lives are almost always the ones that no one else can see. Understanding the underlying logic of your own growth is where the internal friction finally begins to melt away. Take a deep breath, feel the ground beneath you. You are exactly where you need to be to start building. Drink some water, put your phone in another room for a few hours, and give yourself the grace to be a work in progress. If this perspective helped you find a little bit of stillness today, I invite you to click the next video and join us on this journey by subscribing to the channel. We are here to keep peeling back the layers of our complicated lives, one observation at a time. I'll see you in the next one.